Welcome back. I'm going to do another video here about why do werewolves fear vampires. Simple reason more than they fear vampires, more than super simple. It takes almost 3 to 4 days for a person to get bitten by a werewolf on a full moon, but it only takes a couple hours for a human being to get turned into a vampire. Okay, you gotta wait a whole week for a full moon or something to turn into a werewolf. For a vampire, it only takes you about 2 to 3 days according on your immune system and everything, how old that vampire is. I know that vampires have been around longer than werewolves. Okay, vampires have been around since Jesus Christ's time, even before that. You heard of Scarlet, the Vampire, all different kinds of names of vampires and everything. But the first vampire, people might say I'm blaspheming the Bible, was Judas Chadarus. Okay, so when he hung himself, Judas hung himself from the aspen tree, the tree branch broke. People thought he was buried there, but they did not find his body there. None. Later on, White was saying that they seen a person coming in at nighttime, drinking blood of the cattle, before the sunrise. That's typical vampire behavior. Vampires are more ancient than werewolves, in a way. But I'm gonna let you see what I'm talking about. Better right here. So enjoy. Like, comment, and please subscribe to my channel. I can tell you when you're not subscribed. Good day.
Of the Vatican, beneath centuries of devotion and silence. Imagine just for a moment a night shrouded in darkness where two of the world's oldest terrors cross paths. Not in the pages of fiction, but hidden within the very records of the Catholic Church itself. What if I told you that buried deep beneath Rome, guarded by the same order, sworn to protect the soul of humanity, lies an archive brimming with evidence so chilling it could forever change how you see history, religion, and the creatures that haunt our collective nightmares? Welcome to Tales of Mythology, where ancient legends, forgotten horrors, and supernatural wars come to life. If you love exploring the untold side of mythology, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tap the bell below, so you never miss another legendary story. For centuries, the Vatican Library has stood as a temple of knowledge, its countless shelves groaning beneath the weight of tomes and manuscripts. But within this labyrinth of wisdom, a far more exclusive vault exists, the Vatican's secret archives. Whispers abound of what hides in those forbidden halls, documents and relics that trace not only the Church's power, but its hidden wars against the monsters that stalk the shadows of European legend. Picture candle-lit corridors lined with locked doors, behind which lie parchments describing encounters so fantastical they defy belief, the stuff of nightmares, yet meticulously catalogued by men in cassocks and mitres. These files speak of vampires and werewolves, not as fairy tales, but as threats faced and sometimes fought by the world's oldest institution. Among the oldest records are those that detail the Church's uneasy relationship with the supernatural. Far from being passive observers, churchmen often became hunters, chroniclers, and at times victims. In the medieval era, especially between the 12th and 17th centuries, priests and bishops documented extraordinary cases. Villagers gripped by terror, villages abandoned at dusk, fields left untilled because of whispers about nightwalkers and wolfmen. The Church, wielding its influence, dispatched inquisitors and exorcists. Their reports, written in trembling hands, describe encounters where faith was the only shield against unspeakable horrors. As one anonymous Vatican archivist wrote in a letter dated 1612, "In these matters, the boundary between legend and reality is as thin as a wafer. Tread carefully lest you cross from salvation into damnation." The obsession didn't end at exorcisms or the occasional trial. Deep inside these archives are scrolls and letters chronicling the Church's more hands-on efforts. Monks, sometimes cloaked in secrecy, embarked on missions to track these monsters. Some vanished without a trace, others returned, scarred and changed. The evidence of their battles, clawed relics, vials of mysterious fluids, even sketches of supernatural anatomy, remained preserved for future generations of clerics who might face similar terrors. The tension in these records is palpable. Accounts of victory ring hollow when set beside the notes on unexplained disappearances, mutilated corpses, and the silence that followed. Still, The church's leaders believed it their sacred duty to keep these truths hidden, guarding the faithful from panic and heresy. But why all this secrecy? The answer lies as much in the church's need to maintain order as it does in fear of the unknown. If news of vampires or werewolves rampaging across the countryside reached the masses, chaos could follow. Peasants might abandon the church, or worse, turn to darker rituals for protection. Thus, these documents were sealed, their existence denied by all but a select few. As historian Giovanni Ricci notes in his groundbreaking study, The Vatican and the Knight's Children, suppression more than ignorance was the tool by which the Holy See maintained its grip on a world forever haunted by the unknown. Ricci, 2007. However, secrecy could not erase the past, nor could it silence those who stumbled upon fragments of the truth. There are chilling artifacts preserved in the archives. A chalice etched with runes, said to contain the dried blood of a so-called immortal, torn pages describing a desperate exorcism in a Carpathian village. A silver coin, pitted and blackened, rumored to have been pried from the heart of a beast during a forgotten ritual. These relics are more than curiosities. They are evidence that the line between myth and history is blurred by human fear and wonder. Each item raises its own questions. Was there ever a confrontation so fierce, so real, that only faith and steel could decide the outcome? This intersection of faith and folklore shaped the church's responses for generations. At times, the clergy played judge and executioner, presiding over trials where the accused were neither holy man nor holy monster. There are chilling transcriptions of such trials, where afflicted individuals were chained, prayed over, and in some cases put to the sword, all in the hope of saving souls, or at least restoring peace. As the infamous transcript of the trial of Lucien of Béziers records, "We have seen the signs, we have heard the howls. Mercy is but a candle in the wind, for the darkness is hungry and has many names." Yet the church did not act alone. Often it was forced to cooperate with local rulers, warlords, and on rare occasions, those who claimed to know the monster's weaknesses. A game of alliances and betrayals played out in the shadows, where truth was the first casualty. Some believed that only the Vatican possessed the rituals capable of defeating these horrors. Others whispered that the church itself harbored secrets more terrifying than any beast. In the chaos of these centuries, the line between hunter and hunted grew dangerously thin. Despite their efforts, the legends endured. The Vatican's attempts to bury the evidence have only deepened the mystery. With each new discovery, be it a yellowed scroll or a shattered relic, another piece of the puzzle emerges. And so the question remains, were these creatures ever truly vanquished, or merely driven deeper into the night by the Church's relentless pursuit? As we sift through the layers of secrecy, horror, and human ambition, one thing becomes clear. The archives are not just a storehouse of history, but a mirror reflecting our most primal fears. The stories etched into their pages tell us as much about the men who wrote them as the monsters they feared. And as Ricci chillingly concludes, to open the Vatican's archives is to open the human soul at its darkest hour, where faith grapples with the unknown, and the outcome is anything but certain. In the tangled roots of Greek religious life, Orphism emerged not as a rupture, but as a whispering current beneath the more luminous cults of Olympus. The faithful did not parade with banners or gather in marble temples. Instead, their devotion unfolded in secret, their rites hidden from the eyes of the common crowd. Orphic tradition offered a path toward purity and escape from the endless cycle of reincarnation. What marked this faith as unique was its focus on the soul's immortality, the possibility of spiritual liberation, and the search for a union with the divine that went far beyond the feasts and sacrifices of public religion. The initiates of Orphism, guided by poetry and esoteric teachings, believed that to truly live was to prepare for death, and to master the art of returning to life cleansed and renewed. Orphism teaches the soul's path is not finished with death. It merely enters another phase of wandering and striving for the divine. Distinct from the mainstream, Orphic rites revolved around the power of song and the wisdom attributed to Orpheus himself, the poet who charmed the gods and the dead alike. It is said that the text he left behind, poems and hymns, laments and instructions for the afterlife, became the core scripture for generations of seekers. These poems, handed down in fragments and allusions by writers such as Plato, Pausanias, and Diodorus, shaped not only private spirituality, but also public imagination. Even so, Orphism's boundaries blurred easily. It was not a new pantheon, but a transformation of old deities through the lens of loss, longing, and resurrection. The gods remained the same, yet their roles deepened. The cycles of birth, death, and return gained a new resonance, echoed in every secret ritual and whispered verse. There are mysteries, too, in the tales of Dionysus, and among the Orphics all the ancient powers are entwined. At the heart of Orphic practice stood Persephone, the Queen of Shadows. She was the one to whom the dead turned for mercy, the final judge who decided their fate in the silent fields below. Orphic gold tablets found buried with believers instructed souls to approach Persephone with humility, declaring their purity and seeking a place in the realms of bliss. Hail, child of Zeus and Demeter, I come pure among the pure. Grant me passage to the sacred meadow. With her husband Hades, the ruler of the underworld, Persephone controlled more than mere punishment or reward. She embodied the journey itself, the hope for renewal through suffering and understanding. For the Orphics, every soul was a wanderer, every death a crossing, every return a lesson carved in darkness and longing. Another figure, often overlooked by those outside the mysteries, is Phanes, known as the first light, the primal creator. Hatched from the cosmic egg in the Orphic cosmogony, Phanes blazed with golden wings and radiance, a symbol of the beginning of all things. From the egg, the great Protogonos Phanes burst forth bright and beautiful, creator of gods and men. His reign was brief but transformative. He passed his power to Nyx, night herself, who in turn gave it to her son Uranus, the sky, and then to Kronos, time, before the scepter reached the hands of Zeus. The Orphics saw Phanes not only as a source of creation, but as a living symbol of the soul's awakening, the dawn after the longest night, the first cry at the edge of existence. In Phanes, light and darkness mingled. He was both male and female, holding within him all potential and contradiction. The story of Orpheus, too, is inescapable in Orphic thought. His descent into the underworld in search of Eurydice became a metaphor for the initiate's journey, a rite of passage through loss and hope. The legend is haunting. Eurydice, the nymph he loved, perished soon after their wedding, bitten by a serpent. Orpheus, devastated, silenced his lyre and turned his back on the world, until, overcome by grief, he ventured into the realm of the dead. There his music worked miracles. Charon, the ferryman who never carried the living, was enchanted. Cerberus, the monstrous guardian, lulled to sleep. Even Hades and Persephone themselves were moved to tears, granting Orpheus a single chance to lead his love back to life, so long as he did not look back. And as he reached the threshold of sunlight, his longing overcame him. He turned, and she vanished forever into shadow. Ovid, Metamorphoses, Book 10. His journey ended in sorrow, and later, torn apart by followers of Dionysus, Orpheus's head and lyre floated to Lesbos, where his voice and music lingered as oracles, eternal and mournful. The Orphics never separated themselves from the great gods of Greece, yet they wove secret meaning into the old myths. Their rituals honored the same deities, but always with a sense of the invisible, of mysteries hidden beneath every name. The death and rebirth of Zagreus, the suffering of Persephone, the primordial creation by Phanes, all these were chapters in a spiritual journey. Even the harshest tragedies gained the promise of eventual release and transformation. The Orphics saw the cosmos as a place of endless becoming, where pain and joy, loss and hope are bound together by the longing for union with the divine. Dodds, the Greeks and the Irrational, 1951. A crucial figure in preserving and shaping these texts was Onomacritus, whose reputation as both compiler and manipulator of oracles colored the transmission of Orphic lore. Banished from Athens for his alleged forgeries, he nonetheless ensured that Orphic poetry survived, even as scholars debated its origins and authenticity. Plato referenced Orphic hymns to support his philosophical ideas. Aristotle, skeptical of their authorship, still recognized their influence. Their debates illustrate how Orphism was always more a current of thought, an undercurrent in Greek spirituality, than an institution or creed. It had no temples, no hierarchy, but instead a living, ever-changing body of myth and song. For the Orphics, The greatest mysteries were not the grand battles of the gods or the thunderbolts of Zeus, but the silent crossings of the soul, death, rebirth, purification, and union with the divine. Even as the Roman world dawned and new faiths rose, Orphic texts continued to be read, debated, and woven into the fabric of philosophical and religious thought. They survived in quotations, in golden amulets clutched by the dead, in the memory of stories half remembered by poets and philosophers alike. In this labyrinth of belief, Zagreus emerged as a symbol of hope and horror, of suffering endured and light regained, his myth alive with all the contradictions and mysteries that define the Orphic vision. To quote a haunting passage from the Orphic tradition, echoing in the darkness of tombs, "I am a child of earth and starry heaven, but my race is of heaven alone. This you know yourselves. I am parched with thirst and perish. Give me at once cold water flowing from the lake of memory." This thirst for memory and transcendence, for a knowledge beyond death, stands as the legacy of Orphism, a tradition built not on monuments of stone, but on the fragile persistence of faith, hope, and song. From the swirling mist of myth and hidden ritual, Zagreus emerges not just as a mysterious name, but as a being marked by fate, terror, and divine power. His origins, shadowed by secrecy and poetic illusion, are recounted only in scattered fragments of ancient verse and in the whispers of the Orphic tradition. To the Orphics, he was no minor spirit or mere offshoot of Zeus's countless affairs. Zagreus stood at the very heart of cosmic succession, a child set to inherit not only the thunderbolts, but the throne itself. In some accounts, he was born from a union between Persephone and the lord of the underworld, Hades. But far more often, his story begins with a secret, forbidden encounter between Zeus and Persephone, orchestrated in the shadows, away from the gaze of Olympus. Out of Zeus and Persephone, Zagreus was born, horned and divine, destined for greatness. When Persephone, shielded by Demeter from would-be suitors, was hidden away in a secret cave in Sicily, fate was not so easily denied. Zeus, unable to accept separation, took on a fearsome form. He transformed himself into a great serpent or dragon and slipped past the guards. Entwined in this primal shape, he seduced Persephone, and from this union Zagreus was conceived, a divine child already set apart by the mark of the otherworldly. He was born with horns, a sign of chthonic power, and as an infant, he climbed onto the throne of Zeus, his small hand reaching for the thunderbolts, the weapons of supreme authority. In this strange, almost surreal moment, the gods themselves recognized the sign. The torch of rulership, the mark of the true heir, had passed for an instant to the next generation. A child, horned, seized the lightning and took his place on the celestial throne. But the glory of Zagreus was destined to burn only for a brief, dazzling instant. In the tangled web of divine politics, envy and fear were never far behind. Hera, queen of the gods, consumed by jealousy and suspicion, incited the ancient Titans to destroy this would-be usurper. Her resentment, icy and relentless, echoes through the ages as she orchestrated a conspiracy of violence. The Titans, smeared with chalk to conceal their true forms, found Zagreus distracted, entranced by his own reflection in a polished mirror. Here in this eerie image, he glimpsed the endless possibilities of change and transformation, his own divine nature reflected back at him through countless shifting shapes. The attack was sudden and merciless. With knives forged in darkness, the Titans struck the divine child. Zagreus, despite his power, was overwhelmed by treachery rather than open battle. Torn to pieces, his story became one of horror, loss, and transformation. The Titans, masked in white dust, deceived and destroyed the horned child, tearing him limb from limb in a frenzy. Diodorus Siculus, Library of History, cited in Burkert, Greek Religion, 1985. Yet, as his flesh was scattered and consumed, the myth refused to end in silence. From every fragment, from each piece cast into the void, the promise of return and renewal took root. Never simple resurrection, but something stranger, more profound. The gods mourned, but none more than Zeus. Discovering the fate of his chosen heir, he was seized by a wrath so great that the earth itself trembled. His vengeance was catastrophic, thunderbolts rained down upon the Titans, and the world burned. Flames swept across continents, forests turned to ash, and mountains bled rivers of fire. Even the seas wept, boiling and hissing under the relentless assault. Zeus, learning of the Titans' crime, unleashed his fury upon them, setting the world ablaze and bringing ruin to every land. This was not justice, but utter annihilation, a cleansing by storm and flame so fierce it threatened to erase the very memory of the world. The devastation did not end with fire. In the aftermath of this divine cataclysm, Zeus was moved by a moment of pity for the earth itself, scarred and scorched by his anger. To heal the wounds, he called down a deluge, flooding the land and washing away the ashes. This great flood, echoing through countless later myths, served both as punishment and purification, a violent reset for a world broken by divine jealousy and betrayal. Through this cataclysm, the Titans were destroyed, their legacy doomed to linger as a warning for all who would defy the will of Olympus. Yet the death of Zagreus, though unspeakably tragic, was not the end. Orphic myth tells of a peculiar haunting aftermath. From the remains of the Titans and the divine spark of Zagreus' soul, a new being would arise. Some versions speak of Zeus gathering the still beating heart of his slain child and crafting from it a potion or sacred meal, which he gave to Semele, a mortal woman. From this miraculous union, Dionysus would be born, a god who inherited not only the madness and ecstasy of Zagreus, but also his capacity for pain, transformation, and rebirth. Zeus saved the heart and gave it to Semele to eat. Thus was born Dionysus, the twice-born god, heir to both agony and immortality. Zagreus' bloodline, forged in terror and miracle, became the hidden river beneath the grand theater of Greek myth. His death and transfiguration echoed through every rite of Dionysus, every mystery that promised release from suffering and return to the divine. The gods of Orphic faith did not merely punish or reward. They transformed, shattered, and remade, weaving a tapestry of power and sorrow that no mortal could fully unravel. In Zagreus' story, the boundary between life and death, between God and man, was forever blurred, leaving behind only the pulse of myth, urgent, unresolved, and haunting. Let the tale be told in darkness and in the cold, for what is torn asunder shall one day seek the light again. Such is the promise that lingers even in the shadows on the path that leads beyond the thunder. The ashes of the Titans and the silent echoes of Zagreus' dismemberment did not simply vanish into myth. They became a living, burning scar beneath the foundation of the ancient world. In Orphic teaching, this final act was never just a conclusion, but a ripple that spread through the souls of gods and mortals alike. From the charred remains of the Titans and the radiant divinity of Zagreus, a new understanding of suffering, inheritance, and the cycle of transformation would forever haunt the collective imagination. The violence inflicted upon the divine child marked not only the end of a possible golden age, but also the beginning of something far more uncertain, a cosmos torn between light and darkness, in which every being, immortal or mortal, must wrestle with both. It is here that the Orphic myth exposes the rawest nerves of Greek spirituality, a recognition that purity and sin, birth and destruction all flow from a common source. The Titans, having devoured Zagreus, became vessels of both his divine spark and their own primal savagery. When Zeus obliterated them, their ashes mingled with that fragment of divinity, and from this union, according to Orphic tradition, the first human beings were fashioned. From the ashes of the Titans and the divine essence of Zagreus, humanity was born, doomed to bear within itself both guilt and glory, the darkness of its origin, and the hope of redemption. Plutarch, on the eating of flesh, cited in Burkert, Greek Religion, 1985. This origin story, far darker than the tales told by Homer or Hesiod, insisted that the very essence of humanity is a battleground. To be human is to carry within oneself the weight of ancient crimes and the spark of godhood. The consequences of this myth rippled through every aspect of Orphic belief. Rituals of purification were not simply gestures of faith, but desperate, urgent acts, attempts to cleanse the soul of Titan-born violence and awaken the slumbering light of Zagreus within. The promise held out to initiates was not simple immortality, but the possibility of becoming whole, of finally breaking free from the endless wheel of rebirth and suffering. Life itself became a journey through shadow toward a distant, often unreachable redemption. The soul, imprisoned in a body shaped by violence, must struggle life after life to purify itself and return to the divine source. It was a doctrine of hope, but also one of deep, unyielding sorrow, a worldview in which every triumph was tinged with loss, every birth with memory of destruction. In this world, the fate of Zagreus became the hidden axis upon which all Orphic practice turned. Every secret hymn, every gold tablet slipped into the grave, every ritual whispered in the dark was an attempt to remember and redeem the agony at the heart of creation. Even the gods were not exempt from suffering. Even Zeus, crowned with lightning, was powerless to prevent the tragedy that consumed his chosen heir. The pain of Zagreus echoed in the torments of Dionysus, whose rituals were a wild, ecstatic reenactment of tearing and becoming, of death and divine return. The Maenads, followers of Dionysus, danced and howled their way through the forests, embodying both the madness of the Titans and the promise of the god reborn, a frenzy that blurred the line between horror and transcendence. In the madness of Dionysian rites, the memory of Zagreus lives on, a perpetual wound and a distant hope. Euripides the Bacchae, cited in Morford and Lenodon, Classical Mythology, 2013. Yet Orphic tradition refused to allow any final reconciliation. The cosmos remained fractured, a place of endless struggle where loss and transformation were inseparable. Zagreus was mourned but never fully restored. The world, once touched by his innocence, could not return to a state of harmony. There was no happy ending, no ultimate sacrifice that could heal the rift between God and world.